Today, is Mike Perry the greatest bare knuckle boxer to ever live in the modern times? Also, what about Arman Sarukian going out there and putting everyone on notice that he wants his shot at the championship? And what about Jalen Turner's knockout of King Bobby Green? Who is to blame? Is it Jalen Turner? Or is everyone's hit list now aligned to the referee in that fight? All of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. Well, we right back at it. We right back with it. We are coming off of BKFC goes out there with Mike Perry defeating Eddie Alvarez, breaking his orbital bone, cracking his orbital socket and his face, and what was an extremely good bare knuckle fight. I mean, it had plenty of moments where, first it was Mike Perry putting those hands on Eddie Alvarez. Then Eddie Alvarez, the underground king, showing he is not to be played with. He starts firing back shots. There were a few body shots displayed as well, which is obviously what you want to do in a bare knuckle fight to keep them fists from breaking, cracking, and popping like Rice Krispies treats. You know what I'm talking about? Nevertheless, man, Mike Perry goes out there, does his thing. He actually defeats Eddie Alvarez due to corner stoppage when Eddie Alvarez's corner threw in the towel. Probably more than likely due to that cracked orbital bone or orbital socket, I should say. So, what are we going to do about that? You know what I'm saying? Mike Perry goes out there. He gets the win. He is by far the king of BKFC and the king of bare knuckle fighting at this time. He's the most known. So, I mean, where do we go from there? You know what I'm saying? Mike Perry, of course, he is on the MMA Hour today. He has done a couple of interviews since his fight on Saturday night. He is actually calling for a fight between him and Anthony Showtime Pettis in bare knuckle, which that would definitely be cool to see. I would definitely, of course, have to favor Mike Perry in that, because Mike Perry, not only has he tested positive, not only does he own, but the man is just pure dog. There ain't no dog in him. He's just a dog, especially when he's in that BKFC ring. So, what are you going to do? And that would definitely be a fight I would like to see, but, I still got to favor Mike Perry going into that. Now, let's move on. He's also made a call for Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. Now, that right there, even though I completely favor Mike Perry, even though I think Mike Perry would go out there and put those hands devastatingly, in a devastating fashion, on Jorge Masvidal, that would be a fight I would be super interested in seeing the build up, the back and forth between these two, giving Gamebred's history, going back to the Kimbo Slice days of fighting in the backyards in Florida. It would definitely be awesome to see, but let's be real though. Mike Perry currently is a dog when it comes to bare knuckle. Jorge Masvidal owns a bare knuckle MMA fighting company. He is retired from the UFC. He has plenty of money. He's got fame. He's got plenty of business ventures. I'm not questioning his toughness, but I just don't think he's in that mind state or at that point in his life where he's going to go in there and take any meat off of Mike Perry's table. You know what I'm talking about? I just don't think he's still got that gear left in him where he can switch to, you know what I'm saying, and turn it up in bare knuckle boxing. But nevertheless, it would be an outstanding fight, huge fight. I would love to see it. That's bare knuckle fighting. We got that out the way. Shout out to Mike Perry going out there, platinum Mike Perry going out there and getting the job done against the underground king, Eddie Alvarez. Hope to see Eddie Alvarez back in somebody's ring fighting again, because he's a living legend. Nevertheless, let's move on to UFC Austin, which also went down down on Saturday night, in which Arman Sarukian, in the main event, goes out there and KOs Beneil Dariush. KO'd him quickly. KO'd him in the first round. Okay, let's start with Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush, bro, this is what happens. You went out there, you try to talk that game that you gained nothing from this fight. Well, you didn't even win the fight. So, he's a good guy, never met him. But, shout out to Beneil Dariush. But at this point, we know for a fact he's not getting back in that title picture. So, he might end up being demoted down to a gatekeeper at lightweight. But let's move over to Arman Sarukian. Arman Sarukian goes out there, does his thing, made a lot of headlines throughout the week with his exchanges with Bobby Green. He didn't look like the biggest hero, I'll say, in that exchange. Arman Sarukian surrounded Bobby Green. Was kind of talking to him in his face about, a couple different little things. I don't know if Bobby Green said some things over the internet about him or what, but he was definitely saying a few things, Bobby Green, because he's about that life, was ready to nut up and threw up them hands. It was getting ready to go down, even though he was surrounded by quite a few guys. And then UFC officials, I believe, ended up breaking that up. That was last week leading up to the fight night. I don't even think that was on weigh-ins day. I don't know what day that was on, but we'll say it was around Wednesday, Thursday or so of last week. Nevertheless, man, Arman Sarukian did not look good in that exchange, but he looked outstanding in the exchange against Beneil Dariush. I know we have to square some things up with the champion, Islam Makhachev, as, I believe that they are leaning toward a fight between him and Charlie Olive's Charles Oliveira at lightweight. But, Sarukian definitely deserves his chance. He deserves his shot. Now, he is saying that he wants to stay active. So he's saying if he can't get in there and get a lightweight championship fight, then he wants a fight with Justin Gaethje. That would be very interesting, very intriguing. However, I just don't see any way Justin Gaethje is going to take that. Justin Gaethje is probably going to sit out and wait for his shot at the championship, or he's only going to do an extremely huge fight, like maybe a Conor fight or something along those lines. But Justin Gaethje is definitely not going to fight Sarukian just randomly because Sarukian calls for it. He's only going to fight either a huge big money fight like Conor McGregor, or he's just going to sit it out and wait for a shot at Islam Makhachev. So we'll see how that plays out. Shout out to Arman Sarukian. He goes out there, he does his thing. In the co-main event, we had Jalen Turner go out there and viciously KO King Bobby Green. I believe that was in the first round. Here's the thing, man. Shout out to Jalen Turner. I wasn't for sure if he was going to be able to make the weight on such short notice. He not only made the weight, but he also went out there and he shined. He looked poised. He looked confident. He wasn't swayed by Bobby Green's, in-fight tactics of talking and kind of trying to, take his opponent out of his game plan, so to speak. He stayed true to his form, and he ends up knocking out Bobby Green. Now, what's going to overshadow, and this is unfortunate, Jalen Turner's win, is the fact that when he KOs Bobby Green falls face first into the mat. He continues to, he basically almost mounts Bobby Green and just starts laying all of these shots like to the side of Bobby Green's head, but from behind. He's like, wham, wham, wham. And you're like, ref, you could step in any time. Hey, ref, you might want to step in any time and save a man's life. Ref, a man is on the verge of losing his life. You may want to step in. You know what I'm saying? So there's referees over there. You know what I'm saying? This referee, he done made a cup of coffee. He done kicked up his feet. He's checking out the scores of the NCAA games at night. You know what I'm talking about? This dude is chilling. Finally, he decides to step in and save Bobby Green from the brink of disaster. And I mean deadly disaster. You know what I'm talking about? And stop the fight. And I'm not sure what was going on with that. I don't know the referee's name off the top of my head. I'll share it here on the screen. Bink. But, bro, I mean, this dude, what are you doing? You got beef with Bobby Green? You know what I'm talking about? Nevertheless, He finally steps in, stops the fight. Shout out to Jalen Turner. He goes out there, gets a tremendous win. He moves on. We'll see where the UFC is going to try to match him up, next. But he's off a 2-fight losing streak, breaks that. Now he's back in the saddle. I'm talking about the old tarantula. Back out there doing big things. Let's move on. We also saw, I should say, Davison Figueiredo, Figgy Smalls, go out there and get a win, a unanimous decision against Rob Font. Shout out to Davison Figueiredo. I'm a huge fan of him. I was happy to see that his power definitely looks like it carried up to bantamweight from the flyweight division. He definitely looked like he was doing well. His timing looked good. At the beginning of the first round, it looked like he was trying to find that timing. And I thought for a second Rob Font was going to be able to capitalize on Figgy being a little bit, tentative, so to speak. But Davison ends up finding his range, finding his shots, shows that he can take damage from, an extremely tough striker at bantamweight, being Rob Font, because Figgy took some shots, and he, for the most part, he ate them like lunch. So you know what I'm saying? It was good to see Figgy Smalls go back out there, get a big win in the bantamweight division. We'll see where he goes from there. He's definitely going to be a great addition. Let's move on. We had Sean Brady go out there and not only dominate, but submit at the end of the third round, Kelvin Gastelum. So, starting with Kelvin Gastelum, he looked to be in shape down at 170 pounds from, fighting at middleweight. But honestly, man, I just think, I'm not saying Kelvin Gastelum should retire by any means, but I just think Kelvin needs to pump the brakes. I don't know if he's in a situation where he could let the UFC know that he might want a little bit lesser competition to kind of stack up a few wins, get back in the win column. I don't know if he's got that type of, pull or clout, so to speak, with the UFC. But if I was him, that's what I would do, because the boy, he needs to go back in there and get a few wins. He needs to go against maybe lesser or up-and-coming welterweights, to try to see where he stands, because he wasn't looking good in this fight at all. As for Sean Brady, Sean Brady basically came out there and showed he's that guy y'all must have forgot. Shout out to Bilal Muhammad, who went out there and made it look easy, but Sean Brady goes in there and has his way, so to speak, with Kelvin Gastelum. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to him. He dominated. He did his thing. So we'll see where the UFC is gonna kind of put him in the up and coming fights. You know what I'm saying? We'll see what happens with that. He called out Ian Gary. I think that is a good call out if Ian Gary goes out there and wins his fight. Ian Gary definitely topical, definitely in the news. If you haven't seen it yet, go back and check out my second to last episode where I kind of broke down the Ian Gary WAG controversy with his wife. So go back and check that out. And nevertheless, man, shout out to Sean Brady. He gets the job done. He moves forward. Next, we had Cody Brundage go out there, as well as Drakkar Klose. Both men go out there and defeat their opponents when their opponents put them in a submission, and they basically picked the guy up and slammed him. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, what is going on here? Both guys back to back on the card as well. Their opponents locked him in not locked him in a submission, but were attempting submissions, and both men picked up their opponent and dropped him on their head right there, right in the middle of the octagon or slightly at the side, whatever the destination was. It was to the octagon floor. Both opponents were knocked out. So shout out to Drakkar Klose, Cody Brundage. They both get in the win column. They move forward. Interesting fights. A lot of interesting fights when you look at the UFC's card. There was some topical things that went on. It wasn't like a huge card where it just blew your mind, but still very interesting. We also had Miesha Tate. She goes out there. She gets back in the win column. She, basically goes out there, dominates her opponent on the ground, using her wrestling, what she was known for in the past. And she's kind of in a weird holding pattern. It has me wondering if a fight that we could see at UFC 300 being Miesha Tate versus Holly Holmes in a rematch, or if they can get enough money, gather, if they can, if Dana can empty the pockets, if he can dig down deep, get out some of his pocket change out of his pockets, which pocket change in Dana's pockets is in the hundreds of thousands and millions. It will be interesting to see if they could do another fight between Miesha Tate and Rowdy Ronda Rousey. Not sure why my head went from side to side like that, but it did. It would be interesting to see if they could set up a fight between those two women. But nevertheless, we'll see where Miesha Tate goes, and we'll keep our eye on UFC 300. Nevertheless, let's move on. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Veronica Hardy, who goes out there and does work against her opponent. The thing is with Veronica Hardy, shout out to her. Like I said in my preview of that fight, she is still young enough in her career, and obviously with Dan Hardy behind her, she could definitely make a run in her division. So it's going to be interesting to see where she goes from here. I will say that in both of her returning fights, it does seem like that she went out there and dominated round 1 and 2, but the third round is kind of like her cardio kind of slips, or she gets a little fatigued. So I'm not sure if that's based out of physically she's completely fatigued, or if she's thinking in her head, I've got 2 rounds in the bag. Let me go out here and coast the third round and just win by decision. I'm not sure, but that might be something to address. But then again, her husband being Dan Hardy and having the mind that he has, I'm sure he will definitely address that if it can be addressed. So shout out to Veronica Hardy. Shout out to Dan Hardy for getting that win. And that's it. You know what I'm saying? That was it. BKFC, Mike Perry reigns supreme. I just wanted to touch on the main event of that fight, as well as in the main event of UFC Austin, Arman Tsarukyan goes out there and shows that he's definitely down to scrap, throws him hands, knocks out Beneil Dariush. So we're going to see where it all goes from here. So again, I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA, and I'll check you next time. Peace.